Good evening, YouTube. You guys are now watching another segment of the Cali Effect. While MCO 40 is away, I thought, we can talk about breaking the meta. And what I mean by breaking the meta is that there's a lot of great decks in this format that necessarily aren't meta. The battle list has definitely opened up a lot of options, but there are still a lot of old options that we can go back to and even revise to counter the meta. And how exactly are we going to identify these sleeper decks in the format? Well, it's almost kind of obvious. First thing we need to do is recognize what are our meta decks. Our meta decks consist of three types of decks: Burning Abyss, Shadows, and also Satella Knight. Now I'm going to leave out Nutella Knight because they've recently been kind of falling off. And we're just going to morely focus on Burning Abyss and Shadows. Burning Abyss is a really good floater-like deck that abuses traps like Karma Cut and Phoenix One Wing Blast, who's seemingly becoming more and more of a staple to the deck. And then even abuses some of the Monarch counterparts like Caius and Ryza. Some of them use rank up magic to go into Pleiades. Other of them just run 20 traps and 20 monsters like Jeff Jones's build. So they kind of vary, but all in all we can kind of say that it's a floater-like deck that makes another floater-like monster or other rank 3 monsters that can punish us for setting cards or punish us for getting over the cards. Shadows are a very interesting deck because there's more than one winning type of variant. There's the artifact variant, there's the regular variant, there's the light swarm variant, but ultimately they're based on fusion summoning El Shadow Winder and controlling the board from there. They also have a lot of great flip effects, so you really have to watch out for those flip effect monsters. With that being said, let's look into what necessarily happened from last format to this format. Super Poly is no longer a huge threat in our matchups now. So that means a lot of the decks that were amazing in Shadows, and then Super Poly came along and Shadows are like, ha ha ha, fuck you, we can just take your monster anyways. Namely Bujins and a couple of other light decks or dark decks aren't necessarily scared of Shadows anymore because they don't have that. Raigeki is a card now. And when I mean Raigeki is a card, I don't necessarily mean against the meta decks. I mean that at a local level, the decks that we're trying to build to take to a local level to compete against will have a harder time to compete because of Raigeki. While Raigeki hit none of the meta decks in particularly, they hit a lot of lower tier decks because if you dedicate your resources to a board and somebody Raigekis you, it hurts a lot. The next thing is that we have to avoid Vanity's Emptiness. Now, we want to play Vanity's Emptiness as much as possible, because if we can play Vanity's Emptiness in our deck and shut the opponent out from special summoning, then we're doing great. But if our deck is heavily reliant on special summoning and the opponent flips face up with Vanity's Emptiness, we're already in a bad position from deck theory, from the top, into playing these type of decks. The last thing I want to mention is that we don't want to necessarily rely on special summoning from the extra deck in particular, because Shadow Fusion is a card that necessarily feeds on Synchros, Xyz, and Fusion monsters face up on the field. We don't want to have to go into these cards. We want to use them for what they are, utility. So with that being said, let's start talking about the decks that could be relevant, very relevant this format, and possibly even sleepers into the format. First I want to talk about is Prophecy. Now, Prophecy has already been a proven winner, topping that YCS Dallas was really good. I mean, I want to say half of the players got Ebola, and then, the Prophecy player kind of snuck in the top 32 and then made his name right there. But no, Prophecy actually snuck in. And here's the pie chart to prove. That little tiny slice right there, that's Prophecy. So yeah, they've already been a proven winner, which means that they're already doing something right for the format. They started on the right foot. So digging down into why Prophecy was topped and why they are good is that the deck does not need to special summon from the extra deck. You have one monster on a consistent basis you might go into from the extra deck, which is Shining Elf. Other than that, your little boys are probably going to be the only card that's just going to sit on there for a constant long time. That gives Shadow Fusion a very hard time to fusion summoning because now the opponent has to dig through their hand to make plays. That being said, that already gives Prophecy a notch in that category. The next thing is that it is immune to Vanity's Emptiness, a card that I said was really good before. Since the deck does not special summon too much, other than High Priestess of Prophecy, which you don't lose advantage from if your opponent does flip face up Emptiness, the deck doesn't lose to Vanity's Emptiness because you don't need to commit so many monsters special summon to your side of the field. Also, since Little Boy is probably one of your only monsters that you're playing, you normally have some protection or some way to make your little boy stronger than the opposing threat. Spellbook power. That will necessarily make Vanity's Emptiness very, very fragile for the opponent. It makes them running Vanity's Emptiness a bad idea. This deck is extremely good at drawing advantage through the effects of Spellbook Tower, and then boosting your monsters through the effect of Spellbook Power, and then Spellbook of the Master to once again make even your smallest monsters very reputable and stronger than El Shadow Winder. The deck has so many anti-meta counterparts going on for it, you don't know what you can run. There's KYCOO the Ghost Destroyer and Jowgen the Spiritualist. Those two cards effectively hurt both Shadows and Burning Abyss right there off the bat. Only thing you need to do is protect it very well, and guess what? They still have that card that made Prophecy one of the most feared decks of any format, which is Spellbook of Fate. The most problematic spell card in the game if it was more than one. Spellbook of Fate is extremely good because it has multiple effects that address certain given situations to give us an advantage. Also, when we activate Spellbook of Fate, the opponent has to respond before, we can resolve our effect. For example, if I activate Spellbook of Fate and I choose the Banishing effect, banishing 3 spellbooks from my graveyard, my opponent can then activate a card in response. But no matter what he activates, even if he activates the target, even if he protects the card that I initially was going to target, I can just pick a new target because Spellbook of Fate hits the card at resolution. Another thing is that Spellbook Fate doesn't target for you Leo players. Spellbooks have a lot of great things going for them, and that's just one of the premier reasons why it did top YCS Dallas and why it can be a contender and a sleeper in your local format tournament. Next deck I want to talk about is a deck that didn't necessarily see a lot of popularity. It actually started to see a lot of popularity when Black Whirlwind came to 3 and then fell completely off the face of the map. Now, with Gale to 2, this deck could possibly make a change. Black Wings. Their attack altering methods and attack altering methods for the opponent's side of the field could possibly give them an edge in any given battle, because this format isn't necessarily based on battling, but if all your monsters are too weak to get over my monsters, then it's going to be a huge problem. That's something that Burning Abyss has already had a problem with in the past, and really has to rely on cards like Phoenix Wing Blast and Karma Cut. But wait, we can take away cards like that away from them with Delta Crow Anti-Reverse and Icarus Attack, effectively getting rid of our Blackwing monster with Icarus Attack, but wiping out their board. That is really good in a Blackwing matchup. But if we're going mano a mano, monster to monster, we're more than likely going to win with added benefits. Shura allows us to special summon another Blackwing monster from our deck. Bora allows us to inflict piercing damage, so yeah, if we can make Bora strong enough, he's probably going to attack for gain within himself. And Kalut allows us to give any of our monsters 1400 attack plus, and it doesn't matter if we're attacking you directly or battling with your own monster. So Blackwings have a huge edge over a lot of decks when it comes to the battle aspect. Another thing I wanted to point out about Blackwings is that it's almost unsightable against. There are not a lot of great cards to side against Blackwings. A lot of people would argue Shadow-Imprisoning Mirror, but that's a card I want you to side. Why? Because if I'm playing against Shadows or something, obviously I'm not playing against Shadows or something, but if I'm playing against a deck that's siding Shadow-Imprisoning Mirrors, that means that they can't sideboard Skill Drain, a card that I'm either mainboarding or sideboarding to effectively negate all monsters in the field. The deck doesn't necessarily care about monster effects, but if I can activate cards like Skill Drain and completely win the game, I will completely go for it. Another thing is that almost every good sideboard card Blackwings can run, such as Macrocosmos, Dimensional Fizzer. Yes, Blackwings can run these cards, and that's what gives Blackwings a significant edge over a lot of decks. Now, you might not see a lot of them at your local meta because they take a lot of skill, and the players that you probably do see playing Blackwings probably should be playing Vanguard, but Blackwings are a very formidable deck in the right person's hands. The next and last deck I want to talk about that could be a possible sleeper of the format is Bujin. Now, the biggest reason why I felt like Bujin fell off the map last format is because Super Polymerization. Super Polymerization, discards a Shadow monster, and then I get to take your Yamato and you can't respond Bujin Turtle to, kinda ruins Bujin's day. But now with Super Poly at 1, then I feel that the deck can start making some strong pushes to put its foot in the meta. This deck is immune to cards like Karma Cut and Phoenix One-Way Blast, a forte that Burning Abyss has going for him, because Bujin Yamato can just send Bujin Turtles to the graveyard. It's also immune to cards like Vanity's Emptiness because A, it plays it, B, it doesn't really care. It's a battle-oriented deck, kinda like Black Wings. Third is that Bujin has a very good card called Bujin Carnation, which if I do need to special summon for my extra deck, it's probably going to be through Bujin Carnation, which is going to give me my super powered 2400 Bujin monster that add cards from my deck to my hand, so it's going to be worth me Exceed summoning. The main thing that Bujins have is the floodgate cards that it can play, like Kaiser Kalazem. Since the opponent more than likely is playing Burning Abyss, or since if the opponent is more than likely playing Burning Abyss or Shadows, they want to special summon a multitude of monsters to the side of the field so they can start making some big pushes. Well, Kaiser Kalazem says hello, because you're not going to get over this Bujin Yamato, and since you can't get over this Bujin Yamato and you can't have more cards than me, you're stuck with your little monsters in your hand. That's going to force a one-on-one battle. More than likely, Bujin will win those type of games. Some honorable mentions that I really think should be really good in the format would be Monarchs, who are completely underrated. Any deck that can abuse a Monarch variant type base, or even Monarchs themselves, are extremely underrated because they don't need to go to the extra deck. They're completely unaffected by Vanity's Emptiness, and their effects are just amazing. Caius, Ryza, the Vanity's Emptiness, Majesty's Fiend are all really good for the deck and essentially allows you to shut down the opponent. That, and with Monarch Stormforth being a card, I feel that a Monarch-based deck could really ruin the format. The next would be Mermail, because Mermails always find a way to surprise someone in the format. It's a really good deck, and the only thing that Mermails genuinely need is more water support. I'm not even going to say Mermail, is for Konami to slip up and release more water support. The last deck I want to talk about is Card Carry Plan, or Card Carry Machina Plan. This deck has become possible with Global coming to one, and I think it will be the best plant-based deck available right now. But only time will tell if any of these decks will ever becoming a thing inside the format. I'm only giving you guys some points of what you could do if you're playing these type of decks, going into your local or regional against these type of decks. I obviously would suggest that you guys do some extreme playtesting before even going to a YCS, and you might want to main board some of those sideboard options because you are the little guy fighting the meta deck, something that you'll probably be playing against all day. But it'll make Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot more interesting. With that being said, thank you guys for watching another segment of the Kali Effect. I want to know, what decks do you guys feel are sleeper decks in the format? Please like, comment, subscribe, but most of all, enjoy.